Welcome. Good evening, everyone. This is your Girls Right Now Friday Night Salon, an ode to storytelling, the art of interviewing with Abby West and Rebecca Carroll. I personally am so excited for this. I just feel like this is going to be so fruitful. My name's Andrea. I'm with Girls Right Now. I'll be here supporting you all this evening. I just want to go over some of how tonight will go before I pass it over to the stars. So today we'll hear Rebecca and Abby in conversation talking about all things interviewing, oral storytelling, all the good stuff. So that's it for how today will go. I have the lovely opportunity to read the amazing bios before I pass it over. So let me tell you a little bit about Abby West. Abby West is a recovering journalist and true pop culture junkie whose decades at a prominent media organization such as Essence, Entertainment Weekly, and People have given her a love for stories that explore, empower, and celebrate underrepresented communities. Abby is a director of multicultural content programming at Audible and co-founded the Black Employee Network at Audible with Yvonne Durant in 2019. She also serves on the board for Be the Match, the National Merrill Donor Program, and the Children's Law Center of New York. Rebecca Carroll, and these are all abbreviated bios, by the way. Rebecca Carroll is a writer, creative consultant, editor at large, and host of the podcast Come Through with Rebecca Carroll, 15 essential conversations about race in a pivotal year for America. Her latest book, Surviving the White Gaze, a memoir, was published in February, and her new podcast project at Audible, an Audible original called Billy Was a Black Woman, which Rebecca created, wrote, and hosts, was released in April 2021. So these are your lovely hosts for tonight. And now, without further ado, I'll pass it over to Rebecca Carroll and Abby West.
Let me start off. Can I just start off by saying that those videos at the top really proves that Rebecca is much better at taking a compliment and really rolling with it and learn how to say just thank you and articulate it. It was just, I love watching that video because I love your face as he says it. It's my favorite moment ever. Cultural icon.
Oh, thank you. I wish that it was a better visual. I feel like, I did a whole entire book tour and didn't quite get the zoom lens right. I hope that everything looks all right tonight. But yeah, when I look back at that Trevor Noah thing, apart from it being such a lovely conversation, I'm like, why is my image blurred? But whatever. These are the things in a pandemonia.
It's substance and style. I love it. And I have to say, when I was talking to the Girls Right Now crew about doing a salon night around storytelling and interviewing and art or oral storytelling, I really literally did think of you first because I can't remember when we met. We've been trying to figure that out. It was
when I was listening to your bio, I was like, maybe it was Entertainment Weekly.
It might,
or maybe it was People, or maybe it was Essence. All of those publications, though, I have either written for or had some kind of relationship with in a past life. But yeah,
professionally, I've admired your work. I've been, we've had the opportunity to get to know each other, so that's been a joy as well. So I know how well you do it, but I also know how well you approach it and everything that's going on behind your mind. So then, that's something I'm really excited to have you share with this community. So I was extremely grateful that you said yes to joining us for this. So thank you.
Abby, ride or die. Anything you ask, I'll do it, you know. But it's funny, I was listening to that, thinking of that interview with Trevor and how he's like, because you've interviewed so many people, right? Did you think it would be easier? That is actually not how memoir writing works. However, when I was thinking about talking about our histories and bios and our work and how we arrived at where we arrived, and this is in the book, if you've read it, and I don't know how many other people have, but I started interviewing myself when I was in high school. There was this big, beautiful antique mirror over the bathtub in our bathroom upstairs at a farmhouse in New Hampshire where I grew up. And I would sit on the lip of the tub and look at myself in the mirror and interview myself, because I couldn't figure, there was nobody else who looked like me to try to figure out what was going on. And I do think that is how that kind of started the wheel in motion of oral storytelling. Like, if I could talk myself into existence, I could talk new things into existence, new ideas, new language, right? And I always think in my, I mean, my two sort of North Stars, James Baldwin and Toni Morrison, who, you know, Toni says we do language. That is the meaning of life. And James Baldwin says we don't know, nobody knows what's going to happen in that moment. It's happening for the first time, the only time. And so I feel like those are two sort of guiding principles for me and have taken me through to a great many different places and mediums. But like you, I started, well, I guess as a journalist, I guess. I never felt quite right calling myself a journalist because I was never properly formally trained.
I was going to ask you about that because you don't really call yourself that in your memoir either. And
no,
writing for magazines and doing
yeah.
that. So
I was always really interested in interrogating culture. So that's why I call myself a cultural critic more than anything else. But you did get formally journalistically educated, no? Or
yeah.
no?
Yeah, no, I did. I started a long time ago. It was a time where it was very much the prevailing theory: don't major in journalism, major in something that you want to really be an expert at, and minor in journalism. So that's what I did.
Okay.
Started off at NYU. When the money ran out, moved over to Queens College and did that. And
right.
College. So yeah, I worked as a newspaper reporter in newspapers in Connecticut, and then became a magazine, first fact checker, then reporter, then editor, and moving up to do different levels in magazines at Entertainment Weekly and People and whatnot, and then onto digital. And going between the mediums made me go, it's not really about exactly how. What's the thing I like to do? I'm curious by nature. I like to find out stories. I like to deep dive. That was one of my favorite things about being a reporter on a newspaper, was having a beat and like having a space that I came in and had to know everything about, or then also being jack of all trades and figuring out, like, finding out who experts are and to tell that story and be told. That foundation I found was really what I was able to translate across, decades in media and lenses and styles, and to ultimately end up at Audible doing this role, which I didn't even know would be a thing, 15 years ago, or even 5 years ago. That this was.
Well, that's the beautiful thing, I think, about what you've done in your work, is that you have sort of done a bit of a linear trajectory in terms of sort of working your way up. I've gone like left of center at every possible turn and somehow ended up here. But then, after this period of time where you did this kind of linear trajectory, you can do something as wild and new and original and fresh as this. I mean, podcast and audio is such an amazing space for those of us who've worked in media for such a long time. I was a reporter in college for a moment, and I really got tripped up because I didn't. And this is really important if you're a reporter. Like, I never really I didn't sit in the facts. Like, I wasn't comfortable in that. I wanted to create something that was literary, right? I always loved a profile. I loved, my parents got the New Yorker and Vogue and the New York Times, and I loved the lushness of that writing as opposed to so-and-so at corner of 10th and, Harrison, kind of thing. So I didn't even realize that cultural critic or profile writing or literary criticism or literary journalism was a thing until I discovered New York Magazine. Okay. And that whole Gay Talese era.
That you're reminding me of the fact that I remember in my first newspaper job, in a little podunk newspaper up in Connecticut near the casinos. What do I want to be? I really want to be a columnist, but I'm going to wait till I'm like 40. When I'm 40, and
I know.
And that was the way I was approaching it. Which
also, BTW, being a columnist is very freaking hard. Like, I thought that's what I wanted to do as well, and then I got to become a columnist for The Guardian, a few years back, and twice monthly coming up with a really fresh take on what's going on is a lot of pressure. So careful what you wish for when you decide you want to be a columnist or a regular columnist.
Right. And it's, I mean, because anybody, you can come up with a take that you can back up and have people interested in and have solid foundation for. That's the work, because lots of people.
And living with it. Yeah. Yeah.
I am going to, I've said that I want to make sure that we talk about some takeaways, because we're going to do the prompts and have lots of conversations. But, you know, you heard a little bit about both of our backgrounds, and we'll play through a couple other things as well. But I want to run through our top 3 takeaways for what to think about when you're, I'm not going to just say podcasting, but when you're thinking about oral storytelling. And there are more technical if you are creating a podcast, which Rebecca could get into later, but there's the approach to interviewing that you will need storytelling. So do you want to go first, Rebecca?
I mean, I think we could probably agree on what I have first on my list, which is leading with curiosity. I mean, you have to be curious. You just have to. And, you know, if you're not, it's not going to work. It's not going to go well. Even if you know, if someone gives you a professional list of questions, even if you're talking with an actor on a press junket, if you're not genuinely curious, the interview will not go well. That is my number 1.
Absolutely agree. That's even, you know, here's the thing for folks who don't solely get to pursue their own creative endeavor, and that may have to do this as something that they're assigned or that is part of their work.
Right.
You find the thing you're curious about. You know, you can't approach this as just, oh, I got to go do this. I'm just gonna go.
So if I may, that leads into my second one. I didn't even ask for your first one yet, but I just want to say, like, this whole idea of doing your homework or researching, which is really important, but it's more important to research what you are interested in, the angle that you will be sort of fueled by. And that's what will make it an original piece, right? It's like anybody can ask Tom Cruise what it feels like to drop out of an airplane, right? Like, more importantly, it's like interesting that you are the most famous white male celebrity and you're raising a Black son. What's that about? How's that going? You know what I mean? Like, find the angle that is interesting to you in terms of research.
Yeah. I feel like when you show up to a party wearing the same dress, that is on number 2 on my list as well. And I have it addressed kind of as over prepare. You know, I for 2 years or so before I started in this role, I headed up our interview strategy for Audible, talking to authors and narrators.
Oh, and cool.
And heading it up meant that not that I was doing all the interviews, I was hand picking the internal editors and creatives who had expertise in genre or particular passion around an author. Or, I won't say fan, but they have insights. So I worked with each one before every interview to make sure.
What a cool job.
I really loved it. I mean, that's why for my career, I love things that engage me and that help me help other people do shine. I'm a creative fan, right? And then I raise my hand when I'm like, I want to try something different. And then I get to try something different. But in talking to them, you know, having them, I make sure that they look at videos of those people and see what their style is, so that you know if they're withholding, if their style is just naturally withholding, or how you pull them out of it, how they answer certain questions, but to be prepared and familiar in that way as well. Sorry, you were going to say, Rebecca.
Is that one of your top 3?
Yeah.
Because that's a great takeaway. Great for regular interviews, but also for podcasts and audio. Are they good talkers? What kind of talker are they? You know, good talker, whatever that means, but not that there's one particular way. I mean, you can have someone like Tiffany Haddish who will, like, you know, go off the cuff and be just delightful at whatever turn, or you can have a writer who is a little bit more kind of, you know, withheld, and in that way you have to figure out how to have them say something interesting without prying. But I want to say, wait, those are 2 things you said: listen and watch and over prepare. Are those 2 things or the same thing? Because I want to talk about the over preparation.
Over prepare is in the it's equivalent to you doing your research, right? It's, I want you, you're not gonna, you're gonna have, oh, if you're lucky, 30 to 45 minutes maybe with some people, and you're not gonna get to hit all the things, but know all the things that they're talking about, know their backstory. You're not gonna touch everything. You're not gonna show, your job is not to show how smart you are and that you've done all the research, but your job is to know it so that you can help elevate it in a different way. I want them to look at the reason, if there are people like you are on a book tour, I want to know I want you to know the talking points that they're hitting, and how do you dig a little deeper into something that they're hitting already. This is a talking point, and you know they need to hit it. How do you expand on that and deep dive a little bit more? And so you're serving up something that's different.
I think that's really important, but I also think, I mean, you said your job is not to show how smart you are, but I think ultimately when you over prepare, that is what you're trying to do. And I think it ultimately, you know, the times that I've heard somebody say in an interview, oh, you've done your homework, they feel like the interviewer is like, oh, cool. I'm so glad that they recognize that. And that's a waste of time. Like that exchange right there is a waste of time.
But I'm going to ask you, when they say that, oh, you've done your homework, is it when someone has been a little showy with it? And then, like, I heard when you said in that you know, TED talk the other day, like that's a showy way of like showing how smart you are. If they say something that you know they've said before, you don't have to, you know, flaunt that you've seen it or said it, you know, where and how, and look at me, I've done that work. You just know how to pull something next out of it. So it's, when I say it's not to show how smart you are, it is not literally not to go, I've done all this work, do all the work so that you know how you can pull things out differently. And that's really
right. I think that makes sense. I mean, I think as an addendum there, I would say, you know, don't be obtuse,
right.
You know, like you can't talk to, you know, Reverend Barber and not ask him how he feels about Biden's plan for, you know, Black Americans. You know what I'm saying? Like, don't be obtuse, but also I think it's important to not get too caught up in making sure you know every single thing that this person has done or eaten or seen or viewed or thought about in the last year or 2 months or week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the over prepare can be in just like a little beyond the specific scope of the interview. And this was going to lead into the one I know you have contention with, is in knowing your audience. And this may be my holdover from mainstream traditional media and journalism, right? I worked for a magazine that was an entertainment magazine. I worked for a magazine that was, there was people that was a broad swath, but if I'm, you know, kind of know who the people audience is, right? I worked for Essence, talking to Black women. I know the audience for the work, for the lens that you want to put forth. I work for Audible. We're talking about, you know, talking about books, but also themes within it. So I know that I have to make sure that this is both going to appeal to people who are fans of this particular author or people who are covering them. And how do you make that balance between servicing who's already a fan and thinks they know enough about them, they know everything, they just want to consume more about them, and the folks who are just discovering them? How do you find that balance? So that's what I say, know your audience and how you want to serve them.
Yeah, I'm kind of a jerk about that. Like, I don't care. I mean, I'm not trying to cater to anybody. I'm not trying to service anybody. I am speaking to people who are curious and interested and culturally conversant and wanting to be in conversation with the world around them. And so, I mean, I get it, obviously, and I would say quite specifically that the most recent podcast project that I worked on, Billy Was a Black Woman, is for Black women and people who are interested in knowing what we do and how we live and how we are present in this country. But for the most part, you know, like it was a real struggle when I was putting the proposal for the book together. Like, you know, that's the thing. It's marketing. Who's the audience? Who are you trying to speak to? I'm trying to speak to everybody who wants to hear an interesting story about a child who was adopted, a Black child who was adopted by white parents and raised in a white town and figured it out. So I think it's hard. I think, and especially I bristle even when you say mainstream. Like, what the hell is that? Aren't we shifting? Aren't we trying to shift what mainstream means? And how do we do that if we don't put what we're making out into the world, right? For the people specifically, like, who want to engage.
Yeah, it's funny. I've just recently, like earlier today, had a similar conversation around that shifting perspective about mainstream. I was at
Right.
15 years ago. Mainstream does not mean what it means today. Today, we have a full acknowledgement, or even sometimes if it's implicit acknowledgement, that people of color, so-called minorities, underrepresented communities actually drive culture, right? We know this full throat.
Which we have known forever.
Marketing and business did not acknowledge that forever.
Right.
But it is now a thing that companies embrace, that yes, it can't, you're no longer niche, you're all of us. And that's a evolving point, space and time. And so that's a part of the conversation of, like, you can say, yes, it don't have to appeal to just this one person. But again, you're in a more creative space, and I have traditionally aligned under corporations that I have to also, think about where things are going. So, and that is another reason why I wanted to have two different lanes and perspectives, and neither one wholly right or wrong.
Of course not. Of course. In fact, we work in tandem. We work in tandem with each other. For sure we do. And it comes down to, sensibility and integrity and professionalism and all of those words that we throw around. But my whole thing is, don't ask for accountability, be accountability. Don't ask to be part of the mainstream, be the mainstream. And that's, easy for me to say because I'm ancient and I've been doing this forever. But it's very much the Ava DuVernay model, which I think you can apply to any medium. It's like, it's not just about pulling a chair up if there's not a seat. It's really about making a table that you want to sit at. And then, you know what I mean? Yeah. But okay, so my third one, right? My third takeaway, because that was your third takeaway, right?
No, my third one was listen well so you can follow up on interesting unexpected threads.
Listen. We share that completely. I mean, listening is so important. I mean, it's important in every day, but when you're interviewing, it's extremely important, because if you miss the last part of a sentence or comment, you're screwed.
Yeah.
My third is mindfulness of time. And I mean that in both ways. I mean, are you pulling up short and feeling that you've already exhausted yourself? I mean, everybody who in the business I know has done an interview with someone that feels like it's been going on for 3 hours. It's only been 10 minutes, right? And or the opposite. But I think it's really important for yourself to, and I don't generally set a lot of boundaries around conversations or things that I do in my creative work, but time I'm very, very mindful of, because someone who's taken time out in their day to talk to me and to be asked questions, and nobody has time to get asked the same questions that they get asked by everybody else. And so just being clear on what you want to, the place you want to hit in a conversation, and how much time you have to do that, and how much time you are borrowing from another person.
I can't disagree with that. So, I mean, and speaking of time, I think we're about to move and shift into the next section of our salon tonight. I'm going to let our folks driving things kind of take it away. We've got a clip from Rebecca that will lead into her prompt.
And I feel like, and this speaks, really as a testament to you, the way you played her. She had agency.
Mm-hmm.
She, people say a lot of things about her and project a lot of things onto her, but she had agency, and she was bright, and she was talented, and she was sexual.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that for a lot of people, it's hard to parse all of those things without projecting their own kind of stereotype onto her. Were you kind of mindful about, Black women have been stereotyped and troped more than most.
Yeah.
But were you mindful of, let me not over-sexualize her, let me not make her too defiant, let me not make her look too this or too that?
Oh man, did I don't, here's what, I don't think I did, to be honest with you. to me, I never was like, well, let's not make her do this.
Mhm.
I didn't want to protect her. Does that make sense? I wanted to care for her. And I thought the best way to care for her was to tell her truth. You know what I mean? I don't want to do anything that feels like it needs to recreate, because she's had enough of that. And honestly, we as Black women have had enough of that. We're not able to explore and experiment and da-da-da because this is unacceptable, or, you know, this is acceptable. And, you know, there's just been too much of that. And I think the government really actually recreated her narrative. And so for me, the reason I agreed to do the movie was because it was an undoing of that false narrative, you know? So I wasn't really worried about, like, is this going to be too sexual? Is this going to be, I said, if it's true, I don't care. I just want them to see her purpose, her intention, that she was a fighter. There's so many social justice issues that come, race, gay rights, that are tied in to her life in the 40s. You know, she was 2020 functioning in 1940s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. I wasn't really scared of, like, I just wanted it to be truthful. I did not want in any way to falsify her legacy again.
Well, that's the other thing, right? Is that Black women, we're 2020 functioning like from the time we got here.
Yeah, pretty much, sis.
Yeah. Right?
Like, for real.
Yeah, yeah. And
So that was a moment that was real synergy for us, where we sort of melted away from being interviewer and interviewee. But that's a really difficult thing to get. And so I wanted to prompt you all to write down all the differences and or similarities you can think of between an interview and a conversation. What role an interviewer can play in facilitating a conversation, and what do you think a conversation brings to an interview, if that's not too much?
Love that.
Go.
Love everything. Go do your friends, and we'll be back in 7 minutes, I guess. Right?
All right.
Loving me when I take all of me. Can't you see I'm no good without you? Take my lips, I want to lose southern trees bear strange fruit, blood on the leaves and blood at the root, black body swinging. Say, say, say. Say, say, say. Say a prayer for me. Strange fruit come down off that tree. Cut it down under your feet. Juicy fruit, so bittersweet. Fruit stand tall, these roots go deep. Strange fruit busting on these thieves. Ancestors don't take defeat. Left the scent of victory in the air, tigress and tweed. Oh, Lenteric, you carry it. I'm tired, grin buried. The truth of these you carried. Future you and your chariot. Say a prayer for me. 'Cause I done get no sleep. Say a prayer for me. Say, say, say. Chariot. But I've been rallying the troops. Chariots are flaming line behind my Mozzie coupe. Dumb move at these roots. It stick to me. Big fruit, big vibes. Always pressing that line. So full of love and light. The truth is black and white. Say a prayer for me. 'Cause I done get no sleep. Say a prayer for me. Say, say, say. Say a prayer. Say, say, say. Say, say, say. Say a prayer for me. Say a prayer.
The devil and I got up to dance a slow dance. The devil and I got up to dance a slow dance. She held my waist and
I'm so struck by this this first response, that the similarities between interviews and conversations are that we are human beings who want to connect. I'm so struck by that because I think that, again, what makes a conversation or an interview interesting and a story is that we're in our head thinking, okay, I'm passing this down. I'm giving this to someone, right? You're not just doing it because for show. You're doing it because you want to impact someone's life. You want to have someone respond to that and feel something. So I love that. And I think that that's super, super important in any endeavor, obviously, but certainly in that thing that we do, whether it is, through sign language, whether it is through Braille, whether it is through typing something, whether it is, whatever, the connection, the connective tissue is so key to an interview and a conversation. So then the next one is an interview has a question answer format with the interviewer asking and the interviewee answering, and it's usually centered on the interviewee. That is correct. I take a different tact in that obviously it is about the interviewee, but I also come, and I think, and Abby, maybe you can address this as well, but I think it has changed over the course of my career, which is that I don't want to center it around me. I don't want to claim that I am on par with a celebrity in that kind of pop culture way, but I do think that my views are as valid. I do think that my ideas and my lived experiences are as valid. So I think it's really important to distinguish that when you center an interviewee, it's not about fawning. It's not about lifting that person higher than you. It's also not about making it about you. But there's a really important balance of, I'm coming to this, all the things that Abby and I said earlier, prepared, curious, mindful of time with my research, but also I am bringing something to this conversation. Otherwise, this person wouldn't be wanting to talk with me.
Yes.
Right?
I 100% agree that that's been a shift as well, culturally, as well as for me, like thinking again from my journalism, like it's not about you, it's all about this. Everything is influenced and imbued. It can be made better by touching on moments of universal resonance. You know, the uniqueness of each person's story ends up connecting us, and that's the thing. So when there are moments where either your background, your interest, your history, your lens is pertinent to the conversation, bring it into the conversation.
Yes, absolutely.
Not center yourself for the conversation. I've literally told some people that I help to do their interviews to feel free to do that. Be mindful of, I want to make sure that people know more about them than you at the end of it, but feel free to mention something that makes your conversation with them relevant. And, you know, again, when people are going from one interview to another, why do you stand out?
And to that point, I love that Common said to you, you know, Abby, as a Black woman, I love that you are leading this company. You're in a position of power. You know who's not going to say that? A white guy. And so, like, there's a moment where it's like, you know what? Thank you for showing up. And yes, it is kind of amazing that I'm here doing this thing and leading the way, and that you turned that into this really beautiful thing of like, it's about goodness and love. You know, we're trying to send a message and lead us forward, and not like, oh, thank you, I know I'm amazing. It was very much like, we folks are out here.
Right. And that's the thread through to that statement and what you're thinking about. It's about having impact. What is going to help you have this interview, podcast, this conversation interview have impact? Why will it connect with someone else? Part of you can help it connect to someone else, and that's where it comes in.
Absolutely. A conversation can't be limited to one topic. It's unlimited to all topics possible. An interview is limited to one topic. I disagree. I think that if you're thinking an interview, let's say, I mean, are we talking across medium here, or are we specifically talking about podcasts or interviews in terms of single interviews, right? Like with a prominent figure, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's a disservice to yourself to approach it thinking you're talking about one thing. Obviously, as we've touched on earlier on, you want to know what that one thing ostensibly is. Okay. You know, Andra Day is in is in the Billie Holiday film. Ostensibly, it's about her role in the film. But what we ended up doing, because I was very much trying to create this podcast about sort of making Billie accessible to us as a Black woman, like I used that role and her performance as a jump off point to go further into what it feels like to be a Black woman now and in 1930. So I think that, Kellis, what you're saying is that yes, the conversation can go in different directions, but I also think that an interview should be able to go in different directions, so long as you know, and you're leading, or as Abby just said, driving the bus.
Yeah.
You've got to be bold. You've got to be bold and courageous when you come to an interview. You cannot be afraid to ask a question that's going to give you an answer that you didn't anticipate, or that's going to, I mean, obviously you're not going to offend people, you know how to not do that, but like, okay, you know, I'm going to use that Tom Cruise example again. It's like, you have a Black son. You think someone's not going to ask you? You think that there isn't a Black adoptee in a white family out there that isn't curious about how you are raising a Black child? So I think bold, respectful, courageous is what gives you the unexpected learning and that takes place. And thank you, Judith, for that.
I got nothing to add to that. It's fine.
All right, you're up next.
I'm going to tee up. We're going to hear a clip. I'm going to say, unlike what Rebecca said, it's going to be a little fawning, but I will explain why afterwards.
Hi, I'm your Audible editor, Abby West, and I'm excited for you all to meet today's guest, author Donnie Walton, whose debut novel, The Final Revival of Opal and Nev, was one of 2021's most anticipated releases. And the audio version of this fictional oral history of a beloved rock and roll duo who shot to fame in the 70s New York boasts a fantastic multicast lineup, including Bonnie Turpin, Janina Edwards, James Langton, and Andre DeShields. Fire. Donnie Walton, welcome.
Abby, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Of course. And this is about as far as I can go pretending like you're not one of my best friends in the world.
Like for years, literal years.
And as though I have not had the pleasure of being on this journey with you to this moment, to seeing your dream baby, blood, sweat, and tears come to life. So yeah, guys, I'm going to ask questions that other people who don't know you are going to want to hear the answers to, but this is a moment.
It's going to be a kiki. It's going to be like amazing. There might be tears. I don't know. We'll see. Yeah.
A touch. So, you know, we met back at Entertainment Weekly, and then we went on to work again together at Essence Magazine, where you were deputy managing editor. Big job.
Yeah.
Doing all the things. And then you decided that it was time to leave and pursue your life as a novelist. You've got to share with the rest of the world of how you came to that decision, which is huge, and just what helped you get there, why that moment.
You know, writing has always been something that I had done on and off as I had time throughout the years since I was a kid, honestly. And at the time that I started this novel, it was in 2013, and I was going through, you know, some transitions in my personal life, stuff that you know about as my friend. And it was a real crossroads, and I thought, you know, what am I doing? Like at Essence, we covered so many phenomenal, inspiring women who were really following their passions, their dreams. And I think part of that really stuck with me, you know, and made me think, why haven't I really actually tried to do this? Something I've always wanted to do. And at the time, you know, I had this spark of an idea after watching concert footage from Talking Heads' Stop Making Sense, which is a 1984 film. And I was just watching it on my sofa at home, and you see Talking Heads frontman David Byrne at the center of the stage, and he's doing his weirdo dancing thing, but then the camera pans over and you see his Black background singers, whose names I've since learned are Lynn Mabry and Edna Holt. And it just like fired all my synapses somehow. And I just had this urge to reach my hand in the screen and pull one of them to center stage to perform with David Byrne for the rest of the show. And it just kind of sparked all these what if questions that I swear to you, would not let me go. Like we would be in meetings for work and I would like have my notebook and be like scribbling little ideas in the margins. And, this was like getting up at 5 a.m. and working on it before going to the office. And if I had the energy after work, working on it at night. And it just got to a point where, I wanted to really see what I could do with it because I felt like I was strongly onto something. And at the same time, coming from magazines, it was a really challenging time, and the higher up I got, the bigger my job got, the farther away I got from writing and working with words and the things that like I got into it for in the first place. So it was kind of a transitional moment for me. And I decided ultimately, I got this amazing fellowship. And when I applied for that, I had promised myself that I would really go full tilt, like if I got it. And I found that I had to like follow through on that promise to myself. And yeah, that was the beginning of it.
How much, and so that amazing fellowship was the McDowell Colony, which was is huge. How much of the final revival, which was it, I happen to remember that it wasn't called the final revival of Opal and Nev back then, but how much of it had you written by then before you went to the fellowship?
I had probably written about 2/3 of the first draft.
Okay.
When I went, and I went with the intention of, finishing it while I was there. And I was very productive. I wrote about 80 new pages of it, but still had more work to do. And while I was there, I decided to, because I had more work to do, I was like, oh, I'm gonna do an MFA program, So I applied to programs and ended up leaving you and all my amazing friends for 2 years to move to Iowa.
So that was long, but for a reason, because, and you might have picked up on the fawning that I mentioned, because I want to talk about talking to people, and not just talking to people, interviewing people that you know well. I could just as easily have done my interview with Rebecca because I knew her well and had to pull things out in front of other people and not just have like a kiki we would have behind, after with drinks. So I know almost everything to know about Donnie and this book. I specifically had not asked her certain questions in regular conversation so that we could, play with new things for this express purpose. And my role as an interview in this space was to help tell a story, but also pull something else out of the story. So, the prompt, she didn't mention the McDowell Colony, which is something you should know about this little fellowship she got, which is a big deal fellowship, right? So I say it and lead on to something else. So my prompt and thing that I'd like to ask you to think about is how would you go about helping someone you know well shape their narrative through questions that you ask while still leaving room to elicit something new? It's much like when Trevor asked Rebecca, just turn the lens of interviewing on yourself. It's not that simple. It's not as I'd love to see what you guys say. We'll be back in 7 minutes.
Yeah, we'll do 5 to 7 minutes for this one.
All right.
There ain't nothing I can do or nothing I can say that folks don't criticize me, but I'm going to do just as I want to anyway, and don't care just what people say. If I should take the notion to jump into the ocean, ain't nobody's business if I do. If I go to church on Sunday, then cabaret all day Monday, ain't nobody's business if I do. If my man do. If I give him my last nickel and it leaves me in a pickle, ain't nobody's business if I do. Well, I'd rather my man would have hit me than for him to jump up and quit me. Ain't nobody's business if I do. I swear I won't call no copper if I'm beat up by my papa. Ain't nobody's business if I do. Nobody's business. Ain't nobody's business. Nobody's business if I do. I fell in love with you the first time I looked into them there eyes. You have a certain little cute way of flirting with them there eyes. They make me feel so happy. They make me feel so blue. I'm falling, no styling, in a great big way for you. My heart is jumping, you started something with them there eyes. You'd better look out, little brown eyes, if you're wise. They sparkle, they bubble, they gonna get you in a whole lot of trouble. Oh, baby, them there eyes. I fell in love with you the first time I looked at you. You have a certain little cute way of flirting. They make me feel so happy. They make me feel so blue. I'm falling, no starling, in a great big way for you. My heart is jumping, you started something. Them there eyes. You'd better look out, little brown eyes, if you're wise. Sparkle, bubble, they're gonna get you in a whole lot of trouble. I'm looking for the bar with the wishful eyes. I fell in love with them there eyes. Lady sings the blues. She's got them bad. She feels so sad and wants the world to know just what the blues is all about. Lady sings the blues. She tells her side.
Before I launch into the chat, I'm going to just ask Rebecca her thoughts on this one because it's, I feel like you may have different thoughts about it than I do.
Sure. It's interesting. I used to, after I started interviewing myself on the lip of the bathtub, I started interviewing my parents. Because I didn't understand, and I tried to do it in a way that wasn't, confrontational. Of course, it was in many ways, because I was like, "What were you thinking, adopting me?" But then I also, I started to realize that interviewing your people, your friends, your folks, your community was also kind of, if you found a medium and a way to do it, it was a way to engage or create a space for newness to emerge and to sort of take a relationship or a friendship to a next level, which I found really gratifying and cool. Not everybody's into it. Not everybody's into it, for sure. But I do think it's an interesting exercise to do with your friends, with people in your life, and just sort of like, what would you say your favorite color is? I mean, it's a mundane question, but did you know that your brother's favorite color is purple? Or did you know? And what does that mean? And again, it's so much about what both of us have been saying, which is leading with curiosity, but how do you pull threads from the answer, right? So your brother is interested in purple. Do you know who Prince is? Do you like Prince? Has it occurred to you that Prince is all about purpleness? Do you know that Prince and his purpleness was, so and so forth, like it could go in so many different directions. And so I love it, much to the chagrin of my family, certainly my parents, but my husband as well. And my kid. Because I'm always sort of like, what would you say is your this and that? Because I feel like it leads into a whole bunch of different conversations.
I think it actually and very directly kind of leads into Judith's writing and asking questions I feel like would have given you different avenues to explore with your mother, right? I'm getting that sense that in the weeks, if you could have had these conversations before she passed away, and my condolences, along the way on that, I'm so sorry. These are things that, as Rebecca mentioned, that they're not in the normal run-of-the-mill conversation patterns. It's not something you necessarily would know about her viewpoint and her lens and her approach to the world out of normal everyday conversation. You can maybe pick up some things on how she approached because of what she did, but these are specific questions that lead to a thinking that we don't always explore with people we know. You know surface things that you think mean something else, but when you ask a question, what does that actually mean to them? You're on a whole other plane now. And
I would add to that, Abby, that it's how we create language. It's how we create new language. And, Black folks specifically create a lot of the language and vernacular that we use, and that gets sort of co-opted into mainstream. But, it's like, if you ask somebody who's having a different experience than you, how they feel about something as simple as taking a bath, and they say, well, it gives me sort of a prickly knee feeling. You know what I'm saying? It's like you figure out different phrases and ways to say things. So that's all.
I love that. Thank you for sharing those questions and that insight into your thought process, Judith. It's helpful because it's resonance. That's exactly the thing I'm thinking about. Amy mentioned, I think people can forget some things that stand out for you, and you can follow up on those things that you can find interesting and surprising if they don't mention it. That's interesting, where the absence of an answer is the avenue. Sometimes you learn something new from the responses that you can follow up on. No, and you don't need to be specific about a person, but that insight into, yes, you can have a conversation with someone you know, and the fact that they do not answer something the way you think they might, or is a whole new lane and lens to look at. which,
Mhm.
you know, and my greater point to this is that curiosity will lead you into so much in any avenue with anyone, even if you think you know everything there is to know about them. You don't have
It
to,
also makes your brain bigger.
you don't
Makes
have
your brain bigger.
Andra Day or Common or, you know, or Ava DuVernay, you don't have to, they don't have to be A-list stars. They don't have to be celebrity, notable, expert. They can be, I was going to say normal human beings. We're all normal human beings, but they can be someone just in a space that contributes to a larger story. And you can find a lane and avenue with them. And
Sorry, I just want to say we would be remiss though if we did not point out that there are celebrities and people who very much need for it to be about them.
oh yes,
right? There will be interview subjects who very much do not care about you.
Yep.
Or who are very much not curious about where you are coming from. But you'll probably develop a skill that gets you hip to that pretty quickly. Like I remember years ago, and I'm thinking of it because Judith, I think I know you from when I was an editor at the Independent Film and Video Monthly a million years ago. But I interviewed David Strathairn, this brilliant actor, for a film that he was doing, and I had just had my son, and I was really missing him. And I just mentioned that I had left him to do this interview, and we got onto this whole bent about parenting and parenthood and what it feels like at various stages, and so on and so forth. And you know, like that was an example of like clearly this is he doesn't need for this to be about his ego.
Yeah. That's true. And one other side note is if you are interviewing for, you know, I'm just going to say mainstream, for media and not to create something separate, you're going to get a lot of times where people tell you something's off limits. And you gotta figure out how, is it something that's germane to the story? You know, there's still journalistic integrity.
Mm-hmm.
You do an interview where you're going to get the pat answers and the fluff, and it's not bringing you something richer or deeper. There, you know, there are lines that need to be negotiated even before something starts, and then within an interview. I'm pretty sure you probably had that where you're trying to tease that something out of them, and they're either hard shutting it down or soft shutting it, pushing you away. So
it's interesting you say that. I never try to tease anything, actually. I never want people to tell me something they don't want to tell me. And again, I think that those kinds of interviewers are being directed to get a particular story.
Mhm.
And I've never been that kind of interviewer where I felt like I had to get a scoop, you know. And in fact, I feel like that has led me to get more authentic interviews.
I'm surprised to hear that you've never had that happen, given the profile, you know, like cover stories and big profiles that you have to do with.
Well, it's funny you should say that, actually, because I just wrote the June cover of In Style of Andra, who did disclose something very, very like wild and kind of breaking, and she disclosed it because we were just in a vibe, like we were just talking. And she was like, yeah, I just came from, you know, this situation and wasn't great and so on and so forth. And so anyway, I sent the piece in Style, and the first draft was very much like, they said, feels like a snapshot of you guys having a conversation. I was like, yeah, that was the intention. And she said, as opposed to an actual profile. And so she did come back. Yes, my editor absolutely said, hit this, hit this, hit this. And I went back to Andra to get those questions. So yes, that is absolutely an example of that. But also an example of me not going into it trying to get a certain thing.
I love that. And Asma, we'll do this last one and switch into the Q&A. Says, I think I would ask them about the portions of their life I'm not familiar with, or ask them what they remember or how they felt about things I already know. That's exactly right.
Nice.
That's the thing.
Very nice.
You just find new avenues and lanes and be curious. Thanks, Asma.
Yeah, that's perfect. And so we can start opening up for Q&A. People can put their questions in the chat. You can raise your hand to say them out loud. And we do have a couple questions that came in earlier. So Abby and Rebecca, we can jump in with those and then see what comes up in the chat. So because this one is so fun, I want to start here. What's the hardest part of your job?
You go, Rebecca.
Oh, well, I think the hardest part of a job, and right now I'm self-employed. I was at WMYC for 5 years, and left in October to work on a couple of different projects. But I think the hardest thing about jobs is the jobbiness of it. It's just so jobby, you know. It's like there's this framework that has been set in place, and you have to negotiate and navigate and figure out how to be your authentic self in this kind of framework. And I think some of that is changing, particularly for Black folks and people of color. It has to change. But I think, in terms of the sort of traditional, conventional way of existing in a job has never felt natural to me. From what the ungodly hour of waking up to, like taking a quote unquote lunch break, to like all of the things like has never been like my strong suit. So that's my answer. The jobbiness of jobs.
My new favorite phrase, the jobbiness. For me, the hardest part of my work is, it almost sounds Pollyanna, not having enough time and ability to do everything I want to do. Everything I want to do.
Wow.
So interdependent on other pieces of the puzzle to make them come together as a whole. So I mean, it's one of the things I am not good at single focus, one project long term. I like to touch a lot of different things and get balls teed up at the same time and going in a pipeline of things. That's what gets my creative juices going. So, getting to a space where we can have so many of the wonderful stories that I know are there out into the world, new voices, new narratives. There's just not enough time or energy or anything.
No pressure, but I feel like in 5 years, Abby's got her own company. Abby's got her own company, and she is deciding this project, this project, this project, this project. I see it.
You guys know that saying that get you some friends that dream bigger for you than you do. That's it.
That's right. No, I'll see it.
Totally co-signing that. I love both of the commentary. I love the jobbiness of jobs. I love not liking a job that's so jobby.
Yeah.
It lands. It definitely lands.
Facts. Yeah, facts.
The mentees are super interested in, as you guys talked about, the opportunities that are in podcasting and audio and what it's done for media. And one question that came in is, what would you say are the driving criteria for a podcast? What must you have in place in terms of core inquiry and a hook in order to get started?
I want to say that, if you don't mind my starting, Abby, that what was hard for me to wrap my head around when I first started in this medium is that all you have are people's ear. That's it. That's all you have. And so think about creating an audio stimulus that gives you the same experience as a film or a book or a travel adventure or whatever it may be in other sort of sensory tactile forms, and create that in audio. And that's really challenging, but it's super fun. And it's also, I think, bringing it back to the origin of this event, oral storytelling is something that's quite germane to Black folks and Black history, and that we weren't able to read, we weren't able to write, we weren't, our language and our communication was really sacred. And so I think that listening back over to, for example, Angela Davis, some of her her, not her speeches necessarily, but some of her interviews even that she's done, and the way that she articulates her voice and the way that she is able to give you a picture with the absolute tenor of her voice. I mean, I think that's what you look for when you're trying to do a hook. It's like, how do I create an all sensory experience just through the ear?
That's a great answer. I mean, it's just a fantastic answer. My answer will be something I've learned from some of the wonderful editors and producers at Audible who create, have come from various backgrounds and create wonderful things. What are you trying to say? What's the central question you're looking to answer? What's that narrative arc that goes beyond, that takes you beyond just two people talking? That we have just said, two people talking can be a great interview and give you something. But if you're doing a podcast, why does someone want to show up for 5-10 episodes? Where are you taking them from?
Yeah.
That's
yeah. And also, I mean, it should be said, and I'm sure Abby would have a different response to this, but the field, the industry is oversaturated. I mean, it really, really is. And there are a cajillion million plus 700 times 75 podcasts right now. But it's also to your best interest to listen to as many as you can, to see the ones that you think resonate and that work and that don't, because there are lots that don't, and then there are ones that stand out. I always point people to The Read, which is a podcast that's been pre-podcast, but it's this sort of, what makes it work is this bone deep friendship between these two people that actually you can hear that in the way that they talk to each other, in a way that's different from any kind of interview or conversational thing. So, I mean, I think, listen to things and think about what you want to hear, think about what you don't want to hear, definitely. And then, make it really short and sweet in terms of a pitch and a hook.
And don't try to be someone else. The Read works because that's particularly who they are. And
they really, truly don't care if you're listening. And I'm not saying that that's a good thing. I'm saying that what it is it creates an intimacy that you wouldn't hear otherwise.
Right.
And I don't know that there's, that anybody could do it like that, because now, they started, as I said, pre-podcast boom. It's all unscripted. And now podcasts are almost 99% scripted. So, but I will forever point to them as one of the sort of richest sort of audio podcast experiences.
Being mindful of time. I'm gonna let you. I have more to say on that. But
wait, go ahead. What?
No, I was just gonna say that is when I say don't try to be someone else. And you recommended listening to lots of other things. That's great. You're gonna learn what you like. Don't try to emulate someone else's tone or pacing.
Right.
I have surprised of all surprises. I have a vocal fry. I work on my breathing. I can't sound like Rebecca. I don't have that pacing and time. Like, be who you are. Do the right thing to make it sound right. And
super important.
Technically, but your authentic self is what's going to also elevate something.
Totally. So important. This question I love from Asma. Have you ever interviewed someone you found uninteresting? If so, how did you deal with it? I am so grateful to be at a place in my career where I can actually say, no, thank you. I don't want to interview that person because I'm not interested in them. I'm trying to think, were there people? Yes. I mean, I would say when I was a producer on a talk show, an interview show, and I was assigned a subject who he was like a white corporate person. And I had like 4 questions or 3 questions, maybe 2. But so I relied heavily on the prep, right? Like, you do prep for an interview depending upon the platform it is. You have a team or you do the prep yourself. The prep is like, okay, hit these as Abby had said earlier, hit this, 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 and this, ungratifying for me. But if that's the situation that you're in, and your editor or your producer or whatever says, make sure you hit this, this, and this, and you're not interested genuinely in that person, then you have to rely on the prep. But I don't recommend it.
It's not fun.
I recommend passing on the assignment.
Yeah, when you have
or suggesting somebody else.
Yes, I was like, when you have agency to pass on it, but
Yeah.
you also can recommend and elevate someone else's ship, do that.
Right.
I've been
Exactly.
on set visits and had to talk, spend days and talking to people on sets, and have had a couple of not great people who, are either very full of themselves or slightly mean. And that's
right.
part of the gig as well.
Totally. Yeah.
And on that note,
I mean, yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that again, and Abby pointed it out, and I agree with this, once you have agency, but you should always have agency. You should always have agency and know your value and know your worth and know what you're bringing. I know people need to pay rent. Believe me, I know that. But the more you invest in the worth of your intellect, the better positioned you are to ask for what you deserve and what you are worth. And I think that in those situations, because Abby and I both have worked in popular culture a bunch with actors and egos and so on and so forth. I, a few years ago, did a panel, I moderated a panel with a crew of actors from a film about adoption. And I had a lot of criticism around the way in which the white actors dealt with their performances. And this one white male actor was really mean on stage in front of like 150 people. And I was just sort of like, wow, that's the position you want to take, right? I mean, I'm not coming at it this way. It's just a matter of being in touch with yourself, being self-aware, and believing that your view and your experience, you wouldn't be there if you didn't want to get an answer that would further the conversation at large.
You both remind me of the word audacity. I've been thinking about like audio and the AUD, right? And just having the willingness to be bold and confident. And I'd love to squeeze in this last question to get your thoughts from someone who writes, how do you write a formal email or just the pitch to someone you would like to interview for your podcast when you are just starting out? So someone who maybe hasn't established themselves, it's finding their audacity.
I'm going to let Rebecca really take this one, because I've been fortunate enough I know my good fortune in that most of the interviews that I've gone out for, I've had the weight of a major publication or even a local publication, but a publication behind me. So, I know that that hits different when it gets in their inbox. They don't know me. I could be anyone, but you're calling from Entertainment Weekly. Sure. Let's talk. Right. That's a different thing. Go ahead, Rebecca.
As I age myself again, inbox, haha, you say. I started my career, I've published 5 books of interview-based narrative-based interviews with Black writers, Black women writers, Black men writers, prominent Black public figures. But my first book was with Black women writers. And I sent actual written letters with stamps on them to Toni Morrison, Toni K. Bambara, Gloria Wade Gales, Alice Walker, everybody who I admired, Tara McMillan. And, the response was, obviously it was good enough to write a book, but I think what was most important in those cold reach outs was that I wanted them to know that I was both in seeking their wisdom and also their culture, their community, and that it wasn't just about getting this one-off interview. It was about creating a tapestry and something that would live in the hands of younger Black women and folks who would read this book and be able to take the words that they expressed about writing and Blackness and womanness and do something more and bring it to another place. And that's really about, I think for me, it's experiential. It's about, it's the way that I like to move words around on a page. And it was about a genuine admiration. And so that doesn't speak to obviously every experience when you're trying to get an interview. But I do think that it's important to hit those points of, this is bigger than just this one interview. I am admiring of your work. And I want for the things that you say to build on the language that we already have.
Rebecca, someone might say that you have a way with words.
Someone might.
People. You might say. I love the full circleness of that, though, because we started off here talking about interviewing and conversation as this human connection that we all have. And so coming back to extending that hand as just like, I want to connect with you and I want the world to connect with you. So I want to just encourage us all to, if we can come off mute and just fill the room with sound and thank yous and claps for Rebecca and Abby in this juicy conversation. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
That was so fun. That was nice.
An absolute delight. Abby and Rebecca's information is both in the chat. They have both graciously extended their emails. If you're interested, you can put subject GWN. They are, as you can hear, busy people talking to lots of other busy people. So they may not get to your email as fast as you want, but you can send a question or maybe just something that landed with you today, a comment. I'm sure an extension of grace would be really appreciated. Abby and Rebecca, thank you so much for being with us here tonight. I'm going to wrap up with some announcements for those of us who are hanging on, but thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. And thank you, Abby, as ever. And thank everybody for coming. It was really a joy.
Yes, absolutely. So as I wrap up with announcements, I just want to say thank you to essential workers who are still out there putting on the good fight, and especially those who are advocating for justice, who are out there on the front lines. And this is a global fight. So I want to just continue to thank all the people who are continuing the great work. And we acknowledge that we started these salons to have some place to be in a difficult time, and we continue to make it through that time. So thank you all. I also want to say that if you are new to Girls Right Now or don't know much about us, there's tons of ways you can be involved. You can go to girlsrightnow.org/enroll. Our enrollment is open. So if you're interested in being a mentor or a mentee and joining a community of writers and leaders, you definitely want to check out girlsrightnow.org/enroll. If you want to donate and be a part of special programming, you can become a Circle member at girlsrightnow.org/circle. And then you can always support more free programming by giving a donation at girlsrightnow.org/give. So recommend checking out those links in the chat. You can go to girlsrightnow.org to learn more. You can go to our calendar to check out what's available to you. And then, of course, keep in touch and tag us. If you want to share any of your thoughts about today, tag us, tag Abby, tag Rebecca, and we'll be sure to let you know that we appreciate you were here. Thank you so much. Have a good rest of your night. Happy weekend, everybody. See you later.